So apparently Venom 3, The Last Dance, is more ambitious and so much bigger than we could have imagined. And some people picked up on this with the inclusion of Knull being the main villain of Venom The Last Dance. And now Knull co-creator Donny Cates has weighed in about Venom Let There Be Carnage because he has read the script for it. Then he took to Twitter to say some things, and that combined with the report that we have recently heard about Venom's future and Knull's future and the future of Spider-Man 4 leads me and a lot of other fans to think that Sony might kind of be done with their Spider-Man universe, at least temporarily for a while, which is something that I never really expected to say. I've always assumed Sony was going to milk Spider-Man as much as they possibly could, or at least these Spider-Man adjacent characters that they have created a Spider-Man universe around without Spider-Man. But perhaps, maybe, Sony has realized that it doesn't really work without Spider-Man. And we've been talking on the channel about Sony possibly resetting their Spider-verse that they've built and starting from scratch after they had Morbius and Madam Web and a lot of confusing plot points like having Vulture appear, not in the MCU, but in the Sony picture universe of Marvel characters, whatever they're calling it now. But the new reports about Venom 3 lead us to believe that perhaps they're playing ball a little bit more with Marvel Studios. And perhaps they have realized that them making some money from the MCU is probably more money than they'll make doing movies like Madam Web and Morbius. And I'm not really sure how Kraven the Hunter is going to do, but based off of the fans' reactions to it, it'll do okay. Fans are interested a lot more than Madam Web and Morbius, but Sony pretty much knows when it comes to Spider-Man without actually using Spider-Man, Venom was the best that they're going to do, and now this is the last Venom film. And if these reports that we've heard are true, it looks like Sony is looking a little bit more toward the MCU to make them more money and to just overall bring them more success. So first things first, let's talk about what Donny Cates said, the co-creator of Knull. Him and Ryan Stegman created Knull, and he stated in a tweet, "Okay, bottom line, I turn 40 today, and there's a movie being made where a character that Ryan Stegman and I created is fighting a character Todd McFarlane created, Venom, and guess what? Everything else aside, nothing is going to rob me of thinking that's effing rad." Then he put out this tweet. "Also, I've been talking with Sony and I read a script for Venom The Last Dance. And I'll say this, it is so much bigger and so much more ambitious than you can imagine. And, Knull, holy crap. That's how you treat a king. Happy birthday to me." See you at New York Comic Con. So if anybody's a fan of his, check him out at New York Comic Con. But right here, he says the movie is so much bigger and ambitious than really any of us probably expect and imagine. And I don't think anybody was really thinking that Sony was going to use Knull. And some people even now kind of have a problem with it because Knull is such a huge character, too big to be a one and done type of thing. And also, he's incredibly powerful. And a lot of people think, well, how the heck is Venom going to defeat Knull? Well, I actually don't think he's going to in the movie, which leads us to another report from Alex Perez at the Cosmic Circus talking about the future of Venom and the future of Knull. And he stated that he had learned that Knull is not just going to be a one and done. And thank goodness for that. But now the question is, if this is truly the last Venom film, then how is Knull's story going to continue? Well, that's where we look to the MCU. A lot of you probably heard the news that at first for Spider-Man 4, Marvel Studios wanted to develop a very grounded street-level story, but at the same time, Sony was pushing them for a bigger multiversal story. And knowing that Knull might go to the MCU, things are making a little bit more sense now with why Sony wanted this. And Alex Perez stated in his recent report that we're probably going to have to wait to get that street-level story. And he says recently he heard that the upcoming Spider-Man film might pit Tom Holland's Spider-Man and Tom Hardy's Venom together with Venom The Last Dance, setting up the interaction. He states that by the end of Venom The Last Dance, we may see Eddie Brock cross over into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, with some sources indicating that the recent reshoots in NYC for Venom The Last Dance have to do with that, but that remains unconfirmed for now. But let me tell you why this actually does make sense for the ending of Venom: The Last Dance. A lot of people have actually been talking about this. They've been talking about how Venom shouldn't really have a chance against Knull. Knull is the creator of the symbiotes. He's the eldritch god of darkness. The Celestials literally wanted him to serve as the King in Black, but he rejected it and then killed a Celestial. He killed the Celestial with the all-black necrosword that he created. He commands all the symbiotes and has literally made dragon symbiotes before. And in the comics, when he goes to Earth, he actually kills Eddie Brock. So they're gonna have to nerf him or really rely on some comic stories like the symbiotes bonding to hosts who have honor and integrity and nobility, which causes the symbiotes to then learn those traits and eventually turn on Knull. But even then, he's still an eldritch god who managed to kill a Celestial. On paper, Venom shouldn't really have a chance against Knull, but again, we don't know how they're going to depict Knull in the Sony universe. The great news is that according to Donny Cates, Knull and Venom are indeed going to fight. We were actually wondering about that when we saw the trailer, if some symbiotes were going to be the main villain and Knull simply sent them, or if Knull was actually going to go down to Earth and fight Venom and Eddie. So that's the good news, but I still don't see how realistic Venom and Eddie could defeat Knull, and perhaps that's why they go to the MCU. They flee to a different universe to hide. But I stated this in a video before, if they can go to a different multiverse somehow, then Knull most likely can as well. And that's where we could get that Spider-Man versus Eddie in the beginning of the film, probably a Venom versus Spider-Man type of thing, until they realize that neither of them are the bad guy, but Knull is, so now they have to fight him to save the universe. If this is the case, that means that Sony is taking major characters that they have the rights to and putting them in the MCU. This is essentially forfeiting some characters that they have right now to be able to use in their own universe to be able to put them in the MCU. So it's got me thinking, and a lot of people questioning this as well, has Sony finally kind of learned? They might have learned two very important things when it comes to Spider-Man and Spider-Man adjacent related characters. One is that you can't really build a universe based off of Spider-Man characters without Spider-Man. The reason that a lot of people really like these characters, these villains like Kraven the Hunter and characters like Madam Web, is because of their connection to Spider-Man, because of their stories with Spider-Man. Venom was kind of an exception because Tom Hardy does such a good job at playing him, and even then the movies aren't spectacular. They're great movies, but still people think that the MCU could have done better with Venom. So perhaps Sony has finally learned this universe that they're doing without Spider-Man but with Spider-Man characters isn't really going to work without Spider-Man, because they could have very well just done a movie about Knull and put Knull against Venom and done a really big build up to Knull and had several movies, basically make Knull a big bad. But it seems like, if this report is true, they've decided to go a different route and let the MCU do it, which means they could have learned another very important lesson, and that is putting characters in the MCU is a lot more beneficial for everyone, including Sony, than doing them themselves in the Sony universe. Doing a Spider-Man 4 movie with Spider-Man, Venom, and Knull will make way more money than Venom 3, than anything else they could probably even imagine. And it's possible they could even make more of a profit by simply letting Marvel Studios use these characters, collecting some of the money from these movies, than they could if they simply just made their own movie. Just take a look at Morbius and Madam Web. So could this be the end of the Sony Spider-Man universe as we know it? I don't think we'll ever see the true end of it. I think Sony will regroup and try to do a universe with actual Spider-Man. In fact, some people say that the Sony universe already has a Spider-Man, but Sony can't ignore the numbers. We've heard that they're number driven and statistic driven, but the numbers aren't looking good for them. So perhaps they are taking this time to sort of regroup and maybe try to start over with the Spider-Man universe. So this could be the temporary end of it, but I do think Sony will try again, because I don't think Sony is ever going to truly give up the rights to Spider-Man. However, they could make a new deal with Marvel Studios to make it to where if they simply license some characters to them to use in the MCU, they still maintain the rights to own Spider-Man. That could really work for everybody, both studios and the fans. And I've mentioned this before, and based off of the comments that I've read, a lot of people are totally on board with this. Everybody kind of, but Sony. Or maybe not. Perhaps they have learned, and perhaps Knull does appear in Spider-Man 4, and maybe we get what we have been teased with the post-credit scene of Venom Let There Be Carnage Carnage, and the post-credit scene for Spider-Man No Way Home, Venom, and the MCU. Quite a big tease for them to simply just take back, but perhaps that is finally coming to fruition and we'll get to see Venom and Knull in the MCU. But go ahead, let me know your thoughts about this in the comments down below. Do you think Sony is perhaps putting a pause on their Spider-Man universe for now, or do you think they're just going to continue to pump out these movies and Knull and Venom are simply kind of just exceptions? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Please don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date on Venom: The Last Dance, Spider-Man 4, and of course the entirety of the MCU. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. Woof woof.